The Grand Council chamber stretched across 3 football fields, its crystalline walls reflecting the nervous faces of ambassadors from 47 different species. Each delegation sat behind curved desks arranged in perfect circles, their alien forms creating a rainbow of colors, sizes, and geometries that would have amazed any human artist. But today, beauty was the last thing on anyone's mind. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the center podium, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically while his voice boomed through the chamber's translation system. His scaled purple skin glistened under the artificial starlight, and his 3 eyes glowed with barely contained fury. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some fidgeting with their translation devices, others whispering urgent conversations with their aides. For too long, Kethvar declared, his voice echoing off the walls, we have tolerated the presence of these humans in our galaxy. They spread like a plague, claiming world after world, system after system. They ignore our ancient territorial rights. They mock our traditions. They refuse to bow to the natural order that has kept peace for millennia. The human delegation sat quietly at their assigned table near the back of the chamber. Only 12 humans represented their entire species in this gathering of galactic powers, a number that had drawn snickers and whispers when they first arrived. Their table looked almost empty compared to the massive delegations from other empires, some of which brought hundreds of representatives. At the head of the human delegation sat Ambassador Sarah Chun, a middle-aged woman whose calm expression never wavered despite the accusations being hurled at her species. Beside her sat General Marcus Thompson, a man whose weathered face and gray hair spoke of decades of military service. The rest of their small team consisted of diplomats, translators, and advisors who took careful notes as Kethvar continued his speech. The Zephyrian Empire controls over 3,000 star systems, Kethvar announced proudly, spreading his arms wide. Our fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. Our armies have conquered species that you newcomers have never even heard of. We have ruled this galaxy for over 50,000 of your Earth years, bringing order and civilization to chaos. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Corvin Collective's insectoid representatives clicked their approval. The ethereal dominion's energy beings pulsed with supporting colors. Even a usually neutral merchant guild nodded their various heads and appendages. Kethvar's voice grew louder, more threatening. But these humans think they can ignore our authority. They establish colonies and systems we have claimed. They trade with species under our protection without permission. They even dare to offer military aid to worlds that rightfully belong to us. The accusations were not entirely false, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Humanity had indeed been expanding rapidly since they achieved faster-than-light travel just 2 centuries ago. Their colony ships had spread across hundreds of systems, often settling on worlds that older empires considered within their sphere of influence. Human traders had established routes that bypassed traditional galactic commerce networks. And yes, human military advisors had helped several smaller species defend themselves against aggressive neighbors. But what Kethvar didn't mention, what none of the older empires wanted to acknowledge, was why these smaller species kept asking humans for help. The galactic order that the Zephyrians and their allies were so proud was built on submission, tribute, and fear. Younger species were expected to serve older ones. Weaker races were supposed to accept domination by stronger ones. This had been the way of things for millennia. Humans, however, seemed to have missed that particular memo. Today, Kethvar announced, his 3 eyes fixing on the human delegation, I present an ultimatum to the so-called Terran Federation. You will withdraw from all disputed territories. You will cease interfering in the internal affairs of our client species. You will acknowledge Zephyrian authority over this sector of the galaxy. You have 1 standard galactic year to comply. The chamber fell silent. Even the usual whispers and shuffling stopped as every being present focused on what would come next. And if we refuse, Ambassador Chen asked calmly, her voice carrying clearly through the translation system. Kethvar's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile on a human face, but looked purely predatory on his alien features. Then, the Zephyrian Empire will consider it an act of war. And, I assure you, Ambassador, war with us would be unfortunate for your species. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Several smaller delegations looked nervously between the humans and the Zephyrians, already calculating which side they would need to support to survive. The mathematics seemed simple enough. 12 humans versus the representatives of an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. Ambassador Chen looked at her small team, then back at Kethvar. We will need to consult with our government, of course. Such decisions cannot be made lightly. Of course, Kethvar agreed with mock politeness. But do not take too long. The Empire's patience has limits. As the formal session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, the whispers started immediately. The consensus seemed clear. Humanity had finally overreached. They had expanded too far, too fast, without paying proper respect to the established powers. The Zephyrian Empire was older, larger, and more powerful than the upstart Human Federation. This would be a short war, if it came to war at all. More likely, the humans would see reason and accept the terms. The human delegation remained at their table as the chamber emptied around them. Ambassador Chen pulled out a secure communication device and began composing a message to Earth. General Thompson sat quietly beside her, his weathered hands folded on the table, his expression unreadable. One by one, the other delegates filed past the human table on their way out. Some offered sympathetic looks. Others seemed almost eager to see how this would play out. A few whispered among themselves about the coming entertainment. But none of them paid much attention to General Thompson. They saw his gray hair and assumed age meant weakness. They noticed his simple uniform and thought it indicated lower status. They observed his silence and mistook it for fear or uncertainty. They had no idea they were looking at a man who had fought in the Proxima Rebellion, where 5,000 human Marines had held off 50,000 Corvin shock troops for 6 months. They didn't know about the Battle of Wolf 359, where human pilots had turned a crushing defeat into a strategic victory through sheer determination and tactical innovation. They had never heard of the siege of New Shanghai, where human defenders had held their positions even when ammunition ran out, and they had to fight with improvised weapons and pure stubborn refusal to surrender. Most importantly, they didn't understand what it meant when a human military officer sat quietly while politicians and diplomats made threats. In human culture, the most dangerous soldiers were often the ones who said the least. As the last of the alien delegates left the chamber, General Thompson finally spoke, his voice so quiet that only his own team could hear him. Well, he said, his tone conversational, almost casual, this should be interesting. Ambassador Chen looked up from her communication device. The Council wants a full report within 24 hours. They'll need time to consider our options. General Thompson nodded slowly. They'll probably want to know our military assessment as well. And what would that assessment be, General? Thompson was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he considered the question. When he finally answered, his voice carried the weight of experience that came from decades of warfare across dozens of worlds. Ma'am, if the Zephyrian Empire wants a war with humanity, they'll get one. But I don't think they understand what they're asking for. Outside the chamber, alien diplomats continued their whispered conversations about humanity's inevitable surrender. After all, what could 12 humans do against the might of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years? They were about to find out. 3 days after the ultimatum, the Zephyrian Imperial fleet began what they called routine exercises along the borders of human space. Massive dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small city, took up positions just outside the Sol system. Their weapon arrays gleamed in the starlight, while their communication arrays broadcast constant streams of military chatter in the ancient Zephyrian language. Admiral Thyak Moore commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, a vessel that had seen victory in countless campaigns across the galaxy. The bridge was a testament to Zephyrian military might. Holographic displays showed the positions of over 2,000 warships, from massive battlecruisers to nimble fighters. The crew moved with a precision that came from generations of military tradition and unquestioned superiority. Status report, Admiral Thyak Moore demanded, his 4 arms working at different control panels simultaneously. All ships in position, Admiral, reported his communications officer. The human colonies in the outer systems are showing increased traffic, but no military responses. Our intelligence suggests they are evacuating non-essential personnel. Thyak Moore's three eyes focused on the tactical display. As expected, they know they cannot match our firepower. How many ships have the humans deployed to defend their home system? Scans indicate approximately 50 vessels, Admiral. Most appear to be converted civilian ships with military retrofits. Nothing that matches the specifications of a true warship. 50 ships, Thyak Moore mused, almost amused by the number. We could destroy their entire fleet with a single squadron. He gestured toward the massive fleet surrounding them. Still, they should be commended for their courage, even if it is foolish. What the Admiral couldn't see, what his sensors couldn't detect, was the network of defensive platforms that humans have been quietly building throughout their territory for the past 50 years. Hidden asteroid bases, armed space stations disguised as mining operations, and weapons platforms that looked like communication satellites. The human philosophy of warfare had always been about making the enemy pay for every inch of ground, and space was no different. On Earth, the Terran Federation Council had been in emergency session for 72 straight hours. The massive chambers beneath Geneva hummed with activity as representatives from every human colony debated their response to the Zephyrian ultimatum. Some argued for negotiation, others for immediate military action. The discussion grew more heated with each passing hour. "We cannot fight an empire that spans thousands of worlds," declared Representative Morrison from the Alpha Centauri colonies. "Our entire military consists of maybe 200 ships. They have thousands. This is madness." "And what happens when we surrender?" countered General Adams, the Federation's chief military advisor. "Do you think they'll be satisfied with our withdrawal from disputed territories? They'll demand tribute next, then colonies, then complete submission. This isn't about territory, it's about dominance." Secretary of Defense Williams stood at the central podium, her expression grim. "The intelligence reports are clear. The Zephyrian Empire has been building up for this confrontation for months. This ultimatum isn't a negotiating tactic, it's an excuse. They've already decided to attack us." In the back of the chamber, General Thompson sat quietly at a small table, reviewing reports from human military units across known space. Unlike the politicians, he wasn't focused on the size of the enemy fleet or the number of worlds they controlled. He was studying their tactics, their patterns, their weaknesses. Every empire had them, and the bigger they were, the more weaknesses they usually had. General Thompson called President Hassan from the main platform. "You've been unusually quiet during these discussions. What's your assessment of our situation?" Thompson looked up from his reports, his weathered face showing no emotion. "Ma'am, the Zephyrian Empire has been fighting the same kind of war for thousands of years. They overwhelm smaller species with superior numbers, the enemy surrenders, and they incorporate the conquered worlds into their empire. It's worked for them because every species they've faced has fought the same way, ship to ship, fleet to fleet, trying to match their firepower. And we can't match their firepower," Representative Morrison interjected. "That's exactly my point." "No, we can't," Thompson agreed calmly. "But that doesn't mean we can't win." The chamber fell silent. Even the representatives who had been whispering among themselves stopped to listen. "The Zephyrians control 3,000 star systems," Thompson continued, standing slowly. "That means they have 3,000 worlds to defend. Their military is spread across the galaxy, maintaining order and collecting tribute. They can concentrate their forces for offensive operations, but they can't defend everything at once." President Hassan leaned forward. "Go on, General. Humans don't fight the way other species fight," Thompson said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We don't have grand fleets or ancient traditions of honorable combat. We have something else. We adapt. When the enemy is stronger, we don't meet them head-on. We make them chase us. We make them spread out. We make them fight on our terms instead of theirs." He gestured toward the holographic display, showing human territory. "Every human colony has been preparing for this day since we first met hostile aliens. Our ships are fast and maneuverable. Our crews are trained for independent operation. Our colonies are fortified and supplied for long sieges. We can't win a conventional war, but we don't need to." "What are you suggesting?" asked Secretary Williams. Thompson's expression was cold as winter steel. "We let them come. We let them think they're winning. And then We show them what humans do when we're cornered. Across the chamber, representatives exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked hopeful, others terrified. The mathematics still seemed impossible. A few hundred human worlds against an empire that spanned thousands. But there was something in Thompson's voice, something in the way he stood, that made even the most pessimistic representatives pause. This was a man who had fought impossible battles before. This was a soldier who had learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. The Zephyrians have given us 1 year to comply with their ultimatum, President Hassan said finally. How do you propose we use that time? We prepare, Thompson said simply. Every colony, every ship, every human in space needs to understand what's coming. This won't be a short war. It won't be a clean war. But if we do this right, it will be the last war the Zephyrian Empire ever starts. Meanwhile, in the darkness between stars, human ships were already moving. Not toward the Zephyrian fleet in grand formations, but quietly, carefully toward targets that the Empire had never thought to defend. Supply depots in remote systems. Communication relay stations. Mining operations that supplied raw materials for their war machine. The Zephyrians had expected humanity to either surrender immediately or gather their fleet for a desperate last stand at Earth. They hadn't expected humans to simply disappear. Admiral Thyak Moore received the first reports 12 hours later. 3 supply convoys had gone missing in the outer territories. 2 communication stations had gone silent. A mining complex that had operated for centuries was now broadcasting nothing but static. Pirates, his intelligence officer suggested. Or perhaps local rebellions taking advantage of our focus on the human threat. But Thyak Moore was beginning to suspect something else entirely. He had studied human military history, unlike many of his peers who dismissed them as primitives. He knew about their wars on Earth, about their tendency to fight dirty when fighting fair meant losing. Double the guards on all strategic installations, he ordered, and send reconnaissance probes to investigate those missing convoys. I want to know what happened to them. What he would find would be nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no signs of battle. The ships and facilities had simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. It was humanity's opening move in a game the Zephyrian Empire didn't even know they were playing yet. 6 months into the year-long ultimatum, the Zephyrian Empire was beginning to understand that this war would be unlike any they had fought before. What had started as isolated incidents, missing supply convoys, silent outposts, vanished patrols, had escalated into something that their military strategists struggled to classify. Admiral Thyak Moore stood before the massive tactical display in his war room, his 3 eyes tracking the dozens of red markers that indicated attacks on Imperial assets. Each marker represented something impossible. Successful raids on heavily defended positions, supply lines cut deep within Imperial territory, facilities destroyed by enemies who seemed to materialize from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Report, he demanded of his intelligence chief, a thin Zephyrian whose scaled skin had turned pale with stress. In the past month alone, we have lost 14 supply depots, 37 patrol vessels, and 6 major communication hubs, the officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. The attacks follow no recognizable pattern. Some targets are heavily defended, others are remote outposts. Some are strategic, others seem almost random. Human raiders, Thyak Moore stated, though he wasn't asking a question. That's our assumption, Admiral, but we have no proof. No human ships have been detected at any of the attack sites. No human technology has been recovered. In most cases, there isn't even any wreckage to analyze. Thyak Moore turned from the display to face his staff. How is this possible? We have the largest fleet in the galaxy. Our sensors can detect a single ship from light years away. How are humans moving through our territory undetected? What the Admiral didn't know was that humans had spent the past 2 centuries learning to hide in space. Their ships were designed for stealth from the beginning. Small, fast, and equipped with experimental technology that made them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. More importantly, they fought like guerrillas, striking targets of opportunity and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Sarah Martinez commanded one of these ghost ships, the Shadow's Edge, a vessel that looked more like a small asteroid than a warship. Her crew of 20 had been operating behind Zephyrian lines for 4 months, striking at targets and gathering intelligence. They lived in their ship, slept in shifts, and hadn't seen a human world since the war began. Target acquired, reported her navigator, a young man whose skills of finding hidden routes through space had saved their lives more times than Martinez could count. Single supply convoy, 3 cargo ships with 2 escorts. Standard patrol pattern. Martinez studied the tactical display. The convoy was carrying processed metals from a mining world to a Zephyrian fleet assembly point, materials that would eventually become weapons used against human colonies. Escorte de composition. 2 light cruisers, about 50 years old by the design. Crews probably around 200 each. 400 Zephyrians about to die because their empire had decided to threaten humanity. Martinez felt the familiar weight of command, the knowledge that her decisions would end lives. But she also thought about the Zephyrian ultimatum, about the colonies full of human families who would suffer if this war was lost. Weapon status? All systems ready, Captain. Stealth field is holding steady. Initiate attack, run. Target the escorts first. I want those cargo ships intact. The Shadow's edge accelerated toward the convoy, its hull polarized to absorb and scatter sensor pings. The Zephyrian escorts never detected the approaching attack until it was far too late. Precision strikes disabled their engines and weapons, leaving them helpless while Martinez's crew boarded the cargo vessels. 20 minutes later, the convoy had vanished entirely. The cargo ships disappeared into hidden jump points that the Zephyrians didn't know existed. The escort vessels were left drifting in space with their crews unconscious, but alive, a message that humans could be merciful when mercy was warranted. But mercy was becoming rarer as the war escalated. The real turning point came when the Zephyrian Empire made a fatal mistake. They decided to make an example of a human colony. The agricultural world of New Geneva had a population of 2 million civilians, mostly farmers and their families. It was far from any military installation and posed no strategic threat to anyone. Admiral Thyak Moore chose it precisely because it was defenseless. "We will demonstrate the cost of defying the Empire," he announced to his fleet commanders. "One surgical strike, one colony reduced to ash, and the humans will understand the futility of resistance." The attack fleet that approached New Geneva consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and their escorts, more than enough firepower to sterilize the planet's surface. The colonists had no military ships, no orbital defenses, no way to resist. They began evacuating what civilians they could, but everyone knew that most of the population would never make it to the transport ships in time. General Thompson received word of the attack while he was reviewing tactical reports at Federation headquarters. The message was simple and devastating. Zephyrian fleet approaching New Geneva. Estimated time to bombardment, 6 hours. No defensive forces available. Thompson stared at the message for a long moment, his weathered face showing no emotion. Then, he picked up his secure communicator and sent a single coded transmission to every human military unit within 100 light years of New Geneva. The message contained only 3 words. Gloves are off. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when humanity stopped playing defense and started playing to win. Human ships that had been hiding throughout Zephyrian space suddenly revealed themselves. Ghost fleets that had been invisible for months appeared on sensors across the galaxy. Sleeper cells of human operatives that had been gathering intelligence for years activated simultaneously. The Zephyrian supply depot at Kepler Station exploded exactly as Admiral Thyak Moore's fleet reached New Geneva. The massive fleet assembly point at Wolf's Gate went silent 30 seconds later. Communication hubs throughout the Empire began broadcasting human voices, speaking in perfect Zephyrian, delivering the same message to every world, every ship, every outpost. "This is the Terran Federation. You have chosen to threaten our civilians. We warned you that would be a mistake. Consider this our reply." On New Geneva, the colonists watched in amazement as Zephyrian ships began exploding in their own formation. Not from external attack, but from within, their own systems turning against them, their own weapons firing into their hulls, their own reactors overloading in carefully timed sequences. Admiral Thyak Moore's flagship shuddered as explosions ripped through the fleet around him. "What is happening?" he demanded, but his communications officer could only stare at his instruments in shock. "Sir, our ships they're destroying themselves." The automated systems are firing on our own vessels. I don't understand how human sabotage, Thyak Moore realized with growing horror. They've been planning this for months. Years, maybe. Indeed they had. Every piece of Zephyrian technology that humans had captured, every system they had studied, every weakness they had discovered, it had all led to this moment. Human cyber warfare specialists had spent decades learning to hack alien systems, and they had been very, very patient. Within 2 hours, the Zephyrian attack fleet was gone. Not destroyed by human weapons, but turned against itself by human ingenuity. Admiral Thyak Moore found himself aboard one of the few surviving vessels, watching helplessly as his mighty fleet dissolved into wreckage and radiation. And from the surface of New Geneva, 2 million human colonists sent a single message back to Earth. We're still here. The war was far from over, but the galaxy had just learned something important about humanity. When pushed too far, when their backs were against the wall, when their families were threatened, humans didn't just fight back. They fought smart. The destruction of a New Geneva attack fleet sent shockwaves throughout the Zephyrian Empire that went far beyond simple military losses. For the first time in 50,000 years, an Imperial fleet had been completely annihilated not by superior numbers or better weapons, but by an enemy that refused to fight according to the rules. Emperor Zekthul himself called an emergency session of the Imperial High Command. The massive throne room on the capital world of Zephyros Prime had hosted victory celebrations for millennia, but today it echoed with the voices of confused and frightened military leaders. Explain to me, the Emperor's voice boomed from his crystal throne, how 50,000 years of military superiority can be undone by a species that achieved space flight yesterday. Fleet Admiral Korthmak, the Empire's supreme military commander, stood before the throne with his 4 arms crossed in frustration. Your Imperial Majesty, the humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. They do not seek territory or glory. They do not follow the established protocols of warfare. They simply destroy things and disappear, then find them and destroy them. We have tried, Majesty. Our fleets patrol every system, but human ships seem to materialize from nowhere, strike their targets, and vanish again. Our intelligence suggests they have developed some form of advanced stealth technology, but our scientists cannot understand how it works. What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that human stealth wasn't just about technology, it was about thinking differently. While alien species built bigger ships and stronger weapons, humans had focused on making their vessels invisible, silent, and practically undetectable. They had learned to hide in asteroid fields, to mimic space debris, to move through hyperspace using routes that conventional navigation considered impossible. More importantly, humans had learned to think like prey that had suddenly become predators. Captain Rodriguez of the stealth destroyer Phantom Strike exemplified this new breed of human warrior. His ship had been operating in Zephyrian space for 8 months, and in that time they had destroyed over 30 enemy vessels without ever being detected. His crew of 40 lived like ghosts, striking from shadows and melting back into darkness. New target package from command, reported his intelligence officer. Zephyrian supply base at Rigel 7. Major depot for the 3rd Fleet. Rodriguez studied the tactical information. Rigel 7 was heavily defended, orbital weapons platforms, patrol fleets, and thousands of personnel. A direct assault would be suicide, but humans didn't make direct assaults anymore. Security analysis? Automated cargo system handles 90% of supply transfers. All computer-controlled, all networked. Classic Zephyrian efficiency. Rodriguez smiled coldly. Zephyrian efficiency had become their greatest weakness. Their empire was so vast, their systems so automated, that they relied entirely on computer networks to manage their logistics. And human hackers had spent years learning to turn those networks against their creators. Time to delivery? 16 hours until the next supply convoy arrives. We can piggyback our virus into their system during the automated transfer process. Do it. And make sure we're gone before anyone realizes what happened. The attack on Rigel 7 began exactly as planned. The Phantom Strike infiltrated the system's computer network during a routine supply transfer, uploading a virus that would remain dormant for weeks. When it finally activated, Every automated system on the base would turn against the Zephyrians simultaneously, weapons firing on friendly ships, life support systems failing, orbital platforms destroying each other. But the real psychological warfare was just beginning. General Thompson had moved his headquarters to a mobile command ship that roamed through human space, coordinating the war effort while staying ahead of enemy attempts to locate and destroy Federation leadership. The ship's war room looked more like a college computer lab than a military command center, filled with young technicians who waged war through keyboards and quantum processors. Status report. Thompson requested as he entered the room. We now have active infiltration protocols in 70% of major Zephyrian military networks, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, the Federation's chief cyber warfare specialist. Their security is decades behind ours because they never expected to face an enemy that could hack their systems. What about their civilian infrastructure? That's where it gets interesting, General. Their entire empire runs on interconnected networks, transportation, communication, resource distribution, even planetary life support. It's all automated and all vulnerable. Thompson studied the holographic display showing the Zephyrian Empire's network structure. It was beautiful in its complexity and terrifying in its fragility. Could we shut down their entire empire if we wanted to? Theoretically, yes. But that would mean killing billions of civilians. Is that really what we want? It was the question that had been haunting human leadership since the war began. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just a military force. It was a civilization that included countless species, many of whom had been conquered rather than joining willingly. Destroying the Empire completely would mean genocide on a galactic scale. No, Thompson said finally. We're not monsters, but we need to make them understand that continuing this war will cost them everything they've built. What Thompson ordered instead was perhaps more terrifying than simple destruction. Human hackers began systematically demonstrating their control over Zephyrian infrastructure. Traffic control systems in major cities would malfunction for exactly 1 hour, creating massive jams, but no casualties. Power grids would flicker on, and often precisely timed patterns that spelled out messages in ancient Zephyrian. Communication networks would broadcast human music for 30 seconds before returning to normal. The message was clear. Humans could destroy Zephyrian civilization whenever they chose. They were choosing not to, but that choice could change. Emperor Zekthal received the reports with growing dread. His engineers confirmed that human hackers had achieved total penetration of Imperial networks. His military advisors admitted that conventional forces seemed helpless against an enemy they couldn't find or track. His political advisors warned that subject species throughout the Empire were beginning to question Zephyrian invincibility. What do they want? The Emperor demanded during another emergency session. Unknown, Majesty, replied the intelligence chief. They have made no demands, sent no diplomatic communications. They simply continue to attack our infrastructure while demonstrating that they could do far worse. Then we escalate. Prepare Operation Scorched Sky. Fleet Admiral Korthmak shifted uncomfortably. Majesty, that protocol hasn't been used in 20,000 years. It would mean dash. I know what it means, the Emperor snapped. If humans want to play with networks and computers, we will show them the power of overwhelming force. Assemble the Grand Fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior in the Empire. We will burn their home system to ash and scatter their atoms across space. The Grand Fleet of the Zephyrian Empire was a sight that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. Over 10,000 warships of every class, from massive dreadnoughts to swift destroyers, assembled in the dark space between galaxies. It was the largest fleet in recorded history, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. But as the vast armada prepared to jump toward human space, something strange began happening throughout the Empire. Automated systems started failing in carefully coordinated patterns. Transportation networks seized up. Communication arrays went silent. Power grids collapsed. On thousands of worlds, Zephyrian civilization ground to a halt as the infrastructure they had depended on for millennia simply stopped working. Admiral Thyak Moore, now commanding a sector fleet after his defeat at New Geneva, received the message on all channels simultaneously. It was broadcast in perfect Zephyrian, but the voice was unmistakably human, calm, professional, and utterly terrifying in its implications. This is General Marcus Thompson of the Terran Federation. Your Emperor has chosen to escalate this conflict by assembling your Grand Fleet against our home system. We regret this decision. As of this transmission, all automated systems throughout your empire are under human control. Your transportation networks, your communication grids, your power systems, your life support, all of it answers to us now. The transmission paused, and when it resumed, Thompson's voice carried a weight that made even experienced Zephyrian warriors pause. We could have destroyed your civilization months ago. We chose not to because we're not conquerors or genocidal maniacs. We are defenders protecting our families and our freedom. But if your Grand Fleet moves against Earth, if you threaten our civilians again, we will demonstrate exactly what total war means to humanity. Throughout the Empire, screens flickered with images that made the blood of every Zephyrian run cold. Human ships appearing in the heart of their most defended systems. Human troops materializing inside imperial palaces. Human hackers casually browsing through their most classified military secrets. You have 1 hour to recall your Grand Fleet and begin withdrawal from all human territory, Thompson concluded. After that, we stop being nice. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire found itself facing an enemy that could destroy them completely while remaining completely beyond their ability to strike back. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what choice an empire would make when confronted by the one thing they had never faced before, an opponent that fought to win. The throne room of the Zephyrian Empire had never been silent before. For 50,000 years, it had echoed with the sounds of victory celebrations, tribute ceremonies, and the confident voices of rulers who had never known defeat. Now it contained only the labored breathing of Emperor Zekthal and the whispered conversations of advisors who no longer had any advice to give. The holographic displays surrounding the crystal throne showed the impossible reality of their situation. Every major system in the Empire displayed the same status. Network compromised, human control confirmed. Transportation grids were frozen. Communication arrays broadcast only what humans allowed. Power systems flickered on and off according to patterns that spelled out messages in the ancient Zephyrian language. The most chilling message appeared on every screen simultaneously. We are watching. Fleet Admiral Korthmak stood before the throne, his 4 arms trembling slightly as he delivered his report. Your Imperial Majesty, the Grand Fleet reports they are unable to engage their hyperspace drives. The navigation computers refuse to accept jump coordinates toward human space. When our technicians attempt manual overrides, the systems, they display a human face on the screens and say no in perfect Zephyrian. Emperor Zekthal closed his 3 eyes and tried to comprehend how his mighty empire had been reduced to a prisoner in its own technology. What about conventional propulsion? Can we reach human space without hyperspace? At sublight speeds, it would take 40,000 years to reach their home system. And, Majesty, our conventional drives are also compromised. Every ship in the fleet can only travel where human computers allow them to travel. In the dark space where the Grand Fleet waited, Admiral Thyak Moore stared at his command screens in fascination and growing horror. The humans weren't content to simply disable Zephyrian systems. They were demonstrating their complete mastery over them. Weapon systems activated and deactivated in sequence, creating a light show across the massive fleet. Navigation displays showed impossible routes through space that spelled out human words. Even the food replication systems had been reprogrammed to produce meals that looked like tiny human faces. Admiral, reported his communications officer, his voice tight with disbelief. We're receiving a transmission. It's coming from inside our own ship. The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of General Thompson, speaking from what appeared to be the Eternal Dominion's own command center. Behind him, Zephyrian crew members could be seen working at their stations, apparently unaware that their ship had been completely infiltrated. Good evening, Admiral Thyak Moore, Thompson said conversationally. I hope you're enjoying the demonstration. Your ship's computer systems are quite impressive, by the way. Very advanced. It's a shame your programmers never considered the possibility of someone rewriting their base code in real time. Thyak Moore found his voice after a moment of stunned silence. This is impossible. Our security systems are about 50 years behind human cybersecurity technology, Thompson interrupted. Admiral, I'm currently speaking to you from a virtual presence that exists entirely within your ship's computer network. I'm not physically aboard your vessel, but I have complete control over every system on it. Life support, navigation, weapons, even the doors to your personal quarters. To demonstrate his point, the lights in the command center dimmed and brightened in sequence, and the blast doors to the bridge opened and closed repeatedly. Ow! Thiakmor asked, though he dreaded the answer. Your empire has been operating the same way for thousands of years, Thompson explained patiently. You build bigger ships, stronger weapons, more powerful fleets. But you never innovated in the areas that really matter. Information warfare, adaptive tactics, asymmetric combat. You've been fighting the same war against the same kinds of enemies for so long that you forgot there might be other ways to win. The transmission paused while Thompson consulted something off-screen. Admiral, I'm told that you're a student of military history. You understand honor in warfare, courage in the face of overwhelming odds. I respect that. But your Emperor has made a choice that puts both our species in danger. What choice is that? He's decided that pride matters more than survival. The Zephyrian Empire could end this war right now by withdrawing from human space and acknowledging our sovereignty. Instead, he's chosen to assemble every ship you have for a final, devastating assault on our home system. Thiakmor studied Thompson's face on the screen. And what will you do if he continues on this course? Thompson's expression grew cold as winter on a dead world. Admiral, humanity has been preparing for this moment since we first encountered hostile aliens. We spent 200 years developing weapons and tactics that don't depend on having the biggest fleet or the most powerful guns. We've learned to fight wars that other species can't even understand. The image changed to show tactical displays from throughout the Zephyrian Empire. Supply lines severed, communication networks compromised, entire star systems isolated from Imperial control. We could have destroyed your civilization months ago, Admiral. We chose not to because we're not conquerors. But if your Emperor forces our hand, the display showed something that made Thiakmor's blood freeze. Human ships materializing inside Zephyrian space stations. Human troops walking through Imperial palaces. Human hackers casually browsing through classified files while Zephyrian security personnel stood helplessly by. We will dismantle your empire piece by piece until nothing remains but empty space and broken dreams, Thompson concluded. Every world that has served the Empire will be freed. Every species you've conquered will be given the choice to govern themselves. Your 50,000-year reign will end not in glorious battle, but in quiet dissolution as your subjects simply walk away from masters who can no longer protect or control them. On the capital world, Emperor Zekthul watched this same transmission with growing understanding of his impossible situation. His empire wasn't just militarily defeated, it was technologically obsolete. The humans had developed methods of warfare that made traditional concepts of power meaningless. Majesty, whispered his chief advisor. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative solutions. You mean surrender? I mean survival, Majesty. If the humans can do what they claim, if they can truly dismantle the Empire at will, perhaps wisdom lies in negotiation rather than destruction. For the first time in his long reign, Emperor Zekthul considered the possibility that the Zephyrian Empire might not be invincible. He thought of the billions of beings throughout his domain who depended on Imperial infrastructure for their daily survival. He thought of the countless worlds that would suffer if their technological systems simply stopped working. And he thought of the humans who had demonstrated that they could destroy everything he had built without firing a single shot in anger. Open a communication channel to Earth, ordered finally. Request direct negotiations with the Terran Federation leadership. And the Grand Fleet, Majesty? Order them to stand down and return to base. Immediately. 6 hours later, Ambassador Chun found herself once again in the Galactic Council chamber. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. The same aliens who had whispered confidently about humanity's inevitable defeat now watched nervously as she took the central podium. The Zephyrian delegation, led by Ambassador Kethvar, sat in positions that had traditionally been reserved for supplicants and defeated enemies. The Terran Federation has received the Empire's request for negotiations, Chen announced, her voice carrying clearly through the translation system. We are prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict. Kethvar rose from his seat, his forearms spread in a gesture of submission that no one in the chamber had ever seen from a Zephyrian before. Ambassador Chun, the Empire, acknowledges that this war has demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate. We are prepared to discuss withdrawal from all disputed territories. That's a start, Chen replied calmly. But withdrawal isn't enough. This war began because your empire assumed it could dictate terms to humanity through threats and intimidation. Any permanent peace will require guarantees that such behavior won't be repeated. The negotiations that followed would reshape galactic politics for millennia to come. The Zephyrian Empire, faced with the choice between gradual dissolution and negotiated coexistence, chose to transform itself from a conquering force into a cooperative member of the galactic community. But the real change was in how other species viewed humanity. The young race that had seemed primitive and weak just months before had demonstrated capabilities that made them the most feared military power in known space. More importantly, they had shown restraint in victory, choosing negotiation over conquest when they could have demanded anything. General Thompson, watching the negotiations from Earth, reflected on the war's end with mixed emotions. Humanity had won, but the cost had been steep. They had revealed capabilities that would make other species afraid of them for generations. They had demonstrated that humans could be incredibly dangerous when threatened. But they had also shown that humans preferred peace to war, cooperation to domination. In the end, that might be the most important lesson the galaxy learned from the Empire's threatened war. The veteran's reply had indeed chilled the room. But it had also saved two civilizations from destroying each other, and given the galaxy a new understanding of what it meant when humans said they were prepared to defend their freedom. Some wars are won through superior firepower. Others are won through better tactics. But the best wars are won by making the enemy realize that fighting would cost them everything they value, while peace offers them everything they really need. Humanity had learned that lesson well, and the galaxy was about to discover what it meant to live in a universe where the most dangerous predators were also the most reasonable negotiators.